Tonight, without further ado, I am so excited to welcome our author who needs no introduction, heavy metal Princess Leia, and one of the most hardcore writers out there, Kim Kelly, celebrating the release of Fight Like Hell, the untold history of American labor. Kim Kelly is an independent journalist, author, and organizer. She has been a regular labor columnist for Teen Vogue since 2018, and her writing on labor, class, politics, and culture have appeared in The New Republic, The Washington Post, New York Times, The Nation, and Esquire, among many others. Kelly has also worked as a video correspondent for More Perfect Union, The Real News Network, and Means TV. Previously, she was the heavy metal editor at Noisey, Vice's music vertical, and was an original member of the Vice Union. A third-generation union member, she is a member of the Industrial Workers of the World's Freelance Journalist Union, as well as a member and elected councilperson for the Writers Guild of America, East. Recently, she has been covering the Alabama mine strike, which is among the longest strikes ever waged in Alabama. And Kelly will be joined in conversation with Sara Nelson. Sara Nelson has served as the international president of the Association of Flight Attendants, CWA, AFL-CIO, since 2014, the Flight Attendants Union. She first became a union member in 1996 when she was hired as a flight attendant at United Airlines, and today she represents 50,000 of aviation's first responders at 18 airlines. The New York Times called her America's most powerful flight attendant for her role in helping end the 35-day government shutdown. She has received the prestigious Jones Blizzard Award from the United Mine Workers of America, the AFL-CIO MLK Drum Major for Justice Award, and the Eleanor Roosevelt Human Rights Award from Jobs to Justice. Recently, she has been helping mount a major organizing drive at Delta, the only major airline where flight attendants are not unionized. And you can find them both on Twitter, at Grim Kim and at Flying with Sara. So everyone, please join me in welcoming to Politics and Prose, Kim Kelly and Sara Nelson.
So first of all, I just have to say that was a real thrill to get introduced by Isa, who is on the bargaining committee for the Politics and Prose Workers Union. And I think it's important to recognize that we're here in community to talk about the labor movement and Kim's amazing book. And it was this community that rallied around the workers right here in this bookstore to help make sure that they could have their union too. And so I want to say thank you to all of you. My name is Sara Nelson, as Isa introduced me, and I also am very, very happy to be sitting next to a woman who gives me incredible inspiration. So Kim Kelly was first came onto my radar, as I wrote in the foreword, when I read her article in Teen Vogue on what a labor union is and how it works. And I thought, holy cow, what is this doing in Teen Vogue? And thought for sure that it was a fluke. But the truth is that Kim was really seeding the ground for this moment of the workers to rise up and made it possible for this next generation to learn what the answer is to their question of how do we fix this place? And so it was Kim's regular articles that got me very excited about the moment that we were about to turn to, where workers are rising up and finding their power and joining together. And I think I've been giving speeches since 2014 talking about the fact that the premier tactic of the boss to keep us divided is racism and sexism, xenophobia, ageism, all of the isms that they use to try to divide us. And I think especially in this moment right now, to have a book that is not only titled Fight Like Hell, so let's get out of the idea that business unionism is the way to do business. Workers have only ever won when we have fought, and when we've fought like hell, for not only our rights and our families, but those who come after us too. And it's generations of workers who died to give us these rights, and many of their stories we haven't even heard until Kim's book, about those who have been marginalized and cast aside even by the labor movement. So this is a moment for us to get rid of that racist and sexist past that have been, as I said, the premier tactics of the boss to keep us in check and keep our power grounded, and instead understand that we are always stronger and better together. And I have to say that our union has been using the slogan "Stronger Together, Better Together" for about 8 years now. And I'm super excited to be joined here. And I take tremendous pride in the fact that the Association of Flight Attendants will start a new term of office with international officers that are the most diverse in our union's history. So let me introduce you to Keturah Johnson, who is a 35-year-old queer woman of color combat veteran and our new international vice president. And Dante Harris, who is a 22-year union member, black man, international secretary treasurer-elect, and 44 years old, and we're all under the age of 50. Whoop, whoop, for a little bit. So without further ado, let's kick it over to Kim. And Kim, I think it's really important for people to hear a little bit about your story and how you came to be connected with labor, maybe even from early on, but how it became more defined for you as you came into your adult years.
Sure, can y'all hear me? Okay, I've got a little mouth, a little scratchy. I was at a death metal show last night. It got kind of loud. I'm not joking.
Heavy Metal Princess Leia, right here, folks.
But yeah, and that's a big part of the story, right? Like, I have been covering labor for maybe 6-ish, maybe 7 years now. But before that, my whole life was in the heavy metal world, in the music business. I've been, into music and into metal since I was like 12 years old. I've been writing for publications since I was like 15. And I sort of always assumed that that's what my life would be. Like, that's where my focus would stay. That's where my passion would stay. And of course, so much of my life and my passion still resides, within the heavy metal realm. Now, those are my people. That's my world. But I also come from a place, I come from a place that none of y'all have ever heard of called the Pine Barrens in South Jersey. Really? Yeah, okay. 609, I see you. But I'm from a very rural, working class, kind of forgotten little community. And my whole family is union. They're construction workers and steel workers and teachers. My mom worked in kitchens. My other grandma was a newspaper delivery person. You hear about the white collar versus blue collar dichotomy. Nobody in my family has ever worn any kind of collar. That's where I'm from. And I always knew growing up that unions were a good thing. Even if it wasn't something we necessarily discussed at the dinner table, my dad wasn't out there, he wasn't an activist. He wasn't like the Sara type of union member. He was a union member because that was what you do. That's part of his job. The union had his back. It took care of his pay. It took care of health care. It was just something that we could always depend on when we needed it. And that's something that really became apparent when I was about 17. My mom got really sick, and she spent about a year in the hospital. She's still, it's still a little complicated, but at that point, she was in the hospital, and she racked up bills of like $250,000. She had to have brain surgery. It was a whole thing. And if we hadn't had my dad's union health insurance, I don't think any of us would have made it out. My mother wouldn't have made it out. We wouldn't have been able to afford that. My dad worked construction. Where are we going to get $250,000, And that's something that a lot of families in this country had to deal with. But that moment really solidified to me that, okay, unions are a good thing. Gee, wouldn't it be cool if I could be part of one? But of course, at that point, I was writing about heavy metal on the internet and selling t-shirts for bands and booking shows. I didn't think there was a union for people like me. And it was only a few years later, well, maybe like 10 years later, when I was working at Vice as the heavy metal editor, and a coworker pulled me aside and said, "Hey, we're thinking about unionizing. What do you think of that?" And of course, I was like, "Oh, hell yeah. Like, how can I get involved? This rules." I didn't know this was an option for us. And that was right after Gawker had unionized. That was when the first early stirrings of the digital media organizing wave were starting to kind of, pitter-patter. We were the second ones. But to get to the point where we're the second ones, we had to do a lot of organizing and talking to people and allaying fears and educating our coworkers, educating ourselves. And being on every committee, being at every meeting, every bargaining session, I learned firsthand what it's like to be in a union and to fight for a union and to build a union. And I got to know labor lawyers and labor organizers. I got to know just so much more about this world that I'd always sort of known was out there but didn't know had a place for me. And by the end of that, by the time we had gotten our second contract and organized about 400 other people in the building, I got laid off because I worked in digital media. That's what happens. And at that point, I'd been freelancing. I've been freelancing the whole time because Vice didn't pay us shit. That's why we organized. But at that point, I'd been writing more about politics and writing a little bit more about labor. I had gotten this kind of, I'm still freelance, but I got in this gig with Teen Vogue where they gave me a little bit of free reign to write about labor and working class history and really explore this interest that I was developing. And by the time I got laid off in 2019, I was like, okay, I could do the same thing I've always done and see if I can find a music publication that'll pay me more than $50 to write something, or I could try and actually become a labor reporter like I've sort of quietly been trying to do already. And I took a leap of faith and I went freelance and I just wrote my ass off and covered every labor story I could in every publication I could. And it seemed like it was working out pretty okay. And I think it was about a year later when we put together the proposal for this book. And now it's a couple years later after that. So I guess it worked. The gamble worked. And I realized that there was a place for people like me in labor. And there was a place for a lot of other people that had that same perspective, like hadn't grown up knowing that unions were for anybody who didn't work in a coal mine or in a factory, didn't fit in these very small little boxes. While the reality is that every worker needs a union, deserves a union, and should have a union if they want one. And just that shift in my thinking has really impacted the entirety of my life. Like I'm still the same guy, but I'm a much different person in a lot of ways than I was in 2015 than I am now. Like, I was still at Maryland Death Fest yesterday, but I came here today, So yeah, it's been a weird trajectory. Maybe not. I don't know if there is a typical trajectory for a labor reporter, because there's only like 10 of us. But
So I like to say that every reporter is a labor reporter because we are the main event. Okay.
Every story is a labor story. There's always an angle. Every single story
is a labor story. There's always a labor angle. Yeah, that's right. Because nothing happens without us, right? So Kim and I first met in 2019, and she still, to this day, has written my favorite profile that's been written about me. The only one that I didn't cringe when I was because she based it in worker power. And so I'm wearing my United Mine Workers shirt here. Because the longest strike in the country right now is happening in Alabama at Warrior Met against Warrior Met Coal. And the United Mine Workers of America need to get that settled, and they need all of us to support them. And I'm also wearing pearls because in the profile that Kim wrote, she said that I could lead a picket line or rock a string of pearls. And so this is all for Kim. But it's also for the workers. And that's the way that Kim approaches everything. How many of you have read the book already? Okay, well, a lot of you have a lot to look forward to because when Kim writes, she gets right in the center of the story. And she is truthful to really living the ideals of unionism. That there is a place for everyone. Everyone's story should be told. Everyone's truth should be told. And she's unforgiving too. I mean, she'll lay people flat as quick as she builds them up. But it's all done from this place of really respecting humanity. And I have to say that that is the thing that I think has been the most impressive to watch in the time that I've known Kim and been able to spend time with her, is the way that she approaches any kind of situation with this incredible empathy for others. And so about a year ago, a little over a year ago, we were both down in Alabama together for the first event that the mine workers were holding during this Warrior Met strike. And the union members, 60% of them had been hired since the bankruptcy that broke the contract into smithereens and really made it, a much harder job to work. cut their vacation time, their sick leave, cut their pay drastically. They weren't having the kind of lifestyle that they used to have for doing this job. And we talked to some miners there that week, I think, who had only had 4 days off the previous year because there had been so much forced overtime, and they really had no control over their lives. And we're talking to these workers who are in a union that was the premier union, and you'll read through Kim's book all the way through, the mine workers are mentioned, that were responsible for not only building up the rest of the labor movement, but also setting some of the first demands for labor, like the 8-hour day, like fighting for your time off, like fighting for the ability to have dignity and safety at work, and then a good life at home too. And here, this is staring us in the face, and they're taking on the same fights that they were taking on 100 years ago. And Kim is like, I don't know who to talk to. I don't know anybody here. And Cecil Roberts, the president of the mine workers, was walking around trying to bring people together, and people were not necessarily very happy. I mean, they'd just been out on strike. They just voted down a potential contract. It wasn't necessarily a big welcoming crowd, right? But in no time at all, Kim had won people over because they saw her heart and the way that she was asking them about their lives and asking them to tell their stories. And she went back and got how many publications to sponsor you going down to Alabama to cover their strike?
As many as I could.
Yeah. But I felt like almost every week she was telling me I got somebody else to send me to Alabama. And so she became a part of the family too. And that's how she writes this book. It's not as if you are reading about the history of the last 100 years of the labor movement and it's this sterile history. It's as if someone is telling you their family stories. And I have to say, Kim, it's incredible. But I want to ask you, though, out of all the many, many stories that you've told in here, is there a favorite? Is there one that you think of immediately that really inspires you?
Oh man, it's like picking a favorite child. I feel like they're all my friends now, and I have actual friends in the book, like whether it was writing about the coal miners and their wives in Alabama, or my friend who was incarcerated in Rikers and organized a hunger strike. Like there are people in that book that are out here doing work right now that still need our support and need our love. But a favorite? I won't say a favorite because that's just impossible, but someone that I love to talk about because she was just so cool. Like one of the things about this book is that there are a lot of folks in there who aren't, necessarily organizers or they wouldn't consider themselves leaders. They weren't necessarily even part of a union. They're just workers that did something cool, that stood up for themselves, that made history in their own little way, in ways that reverberated out throughout the rest of their lifetime and lifetimes to come. There's this woman, speaking of coal miners, named Ida Mae Stoll, who lived in Ohio in the 1930s, and she was tough as hell. Like she started going into the coal mines. I think she was history. It was easier. There's a couple different ages.
Okay.
When she became famous, there were some newspaper reports that said she started going to work in the coal mine when she was 6. I don't know about all that, but she followed her dad into the mines, and she liked the work, and she was good at the work. And, there were other Appalachian women at the time who were working in family-owned mines. It wasn't that uncommon. What was uncommon about Ida Mae Stoll was that she became a part owner in a coal mine. And she kind of became a little well-known. And the federal mine inspectors showed up and tried to rain on her parade because at that point, women were forbidden from doing heavy labor. Like jobs like that, we weren't allowed. It was illegal. And so when the federal mine inspectors showed up, found Ida Mae at work, even though she tried to chase them off, they came back and they told her that she had to leave. They told her, you can't do this job anymore. Go back to the kitchen. Go back and raise your babies. This is not for you. And she was like, well, like hell it isn't. And she fought it. She went to court. She won. She got her job back. And the way that she presented herself and the way that she spoke to the press was just so... She reminds me of you because she was just totally unequivocal. She was like, this is what I want to do. I can do this. I'm better at this than a lot of guys are. Why should I go sit in the kitchen and do what she called baby work? This is not who I am. This is not what I want to do. And she gave I don't remember the specific quotes, but there's a couple quotes in the book from her that are just so tough. And talking about how she was, like she had more muscle than the mine inspector. And she was right. You see photos of her. She was the Amazon. They referred to her as the Amazon of the coal pits. Which, what a fucking title, you know? But all that to say, though, shout out to Ida Mae Stoll. She wasn't in a union. She didn't think of herself as a leader, but she set a precedent. And she basically just very publicly and very unequivocally said, like, just because of my gender, you can't tell me what to do. You can't tell me what sort of jobs are suitable for me. You can't tell me, you know, oh, I'm a lady, so I can't do this. I have to do this. Like, that doesn't make sense to me, and that shouldn't make sense to you. And this was in the 1930s. And she set that precedent. She refused to back down. And later, decades later, when the mines opened up more to women and other genders, as, federal legislation kind of eased discriminatory policies or discriminatory legislation, all that stuff, more women followed her into the mines, and more women are still in the mines today. And, sometimes it just takes one person to take a stand to change history a little bit and to get that ball rolling.
Yeah, I think so. And I think one of the things that's amazing to me about the book is that because you're mostly focusing on people who had been marginalized workers, workers who were discriminated against, who constantly had to fight just for their right to be there, that every single person is a fighter. I mean, they don't back down at all. They're tough as nails, almost every single story that's told. But you talk about a lot of different workers in different industries, and you actually have a whole chapter on incarcerated workers. You have a whole chapter on sex workers. You talk about fighting, but you also, there's a through line through the entire book and 100 years of history of incarcerated workers who had to fight for rights on the job all the way through. And you also talk about, and have been a real critic of police brutality and police intersection with the working class. And I'm just curious if you could expand on both of those things a little bit. And I'd like to know if in your research of the book, if you gained more knowledge about the interplay between the state and the instruction of the police to break labor strikes. Did you learn more about that, or do you feel like it just reinforced what you already knew?
Well, you're going to get me in trouble asking a question like that. And I mean, it's as very apparent in the book, in history, and any given day in this country. Like, the cops have never been on our side. Like, cops aren't workers. It's ridiculous to pretend that they are. At best, they're part of the management class. At worst, they're the armed arm of capital itself. And it's including them within the labor movement in any sort of way that isn't adversarial just doesn't make any sense to me. And I think if you go through labor history and see how that is manifested and played out, like in real time on the picket lines, in the woods, in the hills of Appalachia, where the mine wars went down and armed mine guards went to war against coal miners who just wanted a fucking union. Or think about police right now brutalizing working class people, especially black, brown, and indigenous working class people, constantly in this country. Like, I know that it's a complex conversation within this, like the organized labor movement. What do we do about the cops? How does that impact other public sector workers? Like, it's a conversation, sure, but I know how I feel about it. And I think that my own stances on those things definitely informed the way that I wrote the book and the stories I chose to exhibit, and just kind of the examples I chose to show. Because it's not hard to find examples of police brutality and cops, brutalizing the working class. That's kind of been their whole job since the jump. And especially, like, the fact that I have an entire chapter on incarcerated workers, like, that's a subject that's very dear to me personally, because, like, one of my best friends was in Rikers while I was writing this book, and I was interviewing him in 15-minute increments, and just hearing about what he and his co-workers were dealing with behind the walls. And just the fact that, police unions are so powerful and incarcerated workers are so vulnerable and are actually, as something I found thanks to my friend Victoria Law, a really brilliant abolitionist, journalist, and author. I was interviewing her for the book. We were talking about something else, and she said at one point, like, hey, there's something, unions. There's something happened in the 70s with, like, the courts and unions that messed up the union movement in prisons. I don't know. You should look it up. And I was like, what? Okay. And I figured out what she was talking about. The 1977 Jones versus North Carolina prisoner labor union decision that essentially said that incarcerated people, incarcerated workers, do not have the right to form or join a union. That's a right that almost every other worker in this country has, but just because of the specific situation these workers are placed in, they don't have that right. They're not allowed. I mean, those workers have organized anyway. Like, they have done incredible things to advance the cause of, ending prison slavery and actually trying to get a little bit closer to working class liberation, but it kills me a little bit just seeing the contrast between the way those two groups are treated and regarded and the way that power is distributed so incredibly unequally. And it was really important to me to kind of center incarcerated workers in this book because those folks don't necessarily show up in every labor history, in every conversation around labor. They won't talk about being marginalized or shoved to the side. People who are locked in cages, who then have to go to work, who can't, they're not gonna clock out. They don't have the rights that people outside the walls have, but they're still workers, and their work is creating so much profit for the people oppressing them. Like, you can read more about it in the book. And I could talk about this forever, but that's where I'm coming from, and I hope that comes through in the book.
Yeah, I think that there is a theme that the workers who have been marginalized, mistreated, their labor has been abused, that has all been a tool of the boss to make other workers have to compete with that. And so there is a constant, drag when you allow that to go on. And I think that it comes across as very empathetic, actually, and helps other workers understand why this is something that they should care about.
Right. I mean, one of my favorite little examples from the book that I like to talk about all the time because I think maybe not a lot of people know about it, and it's just really cool because it's a piece of Hawaiian labor history. And I really wanted to make sure I hit, like, as many geographical areas as I could when I was doing research because, like, we know what goes on in New York. We kind of know what goes on in LA and Chicago, but there's a whole other world out there, right? But that example, the 1946 sugar strike, Great Sugar Strike in Hawaii, which happened at a point when the majority, if not all, of the sugarcane plantations on the islands were owned by white European dudes who lived on the mainland and were worked by native Hawaiians and Chinese, Japanese, Korean, Filipino, and immigrants from other backgrounds too. It was a very diverse, very multiracial, multi-ethnic workforce who were slaving away in the fields, who were creating all that profit, and who were being treated differently. These were workers they were paid differently based on ethnicity. They were kept in segregated camps. The bosses were very clear about why that was, about how important it was for them to prevent these workers from organizing, from building solidarity. Because throughout, at various points throughout that specific history, those workers have been pitted against one another. Like, Filipino workers were brought in to break Japanese worker strikes, or vice versa. Like, those were the conditions they were organizing under. And when 1946 came around, when their union, the ILWU, International Longshore Warehouse Workers Union, it's all these acronyms. There's so many acronyms. That one rolls off the tongue. ILWU. They decided it was time to strike. And when they were doing their strike prep, they were like, okay, we can't let them divide us again. We can't let them pit worker against worker and try and use this, this racist, xenophobic framework to keep workers from coming together. And so they took these very basic steps that, they're so common sense, but they're so revolutionary in how effective they were. They recruited worker leaders that spoke different languages, and they held meetings where there were translators, where everyone was able to understand what was happening. Everyone felt heard. There was the isolation that comes from not being able to understand something. They got rid of that. They built community kitchens and had the workers cook for one another and share, cultural recipes. And honestly, it makes me think of what happened in Staten Island with the Amazon workers, right? Like, whether it was, Filipino workers sharing rice recipes with Japanese workers or jollof rice and barbecue in Staten Island, feeding people, connecting on that human level, saying, I see you, I understand you, I care about you. That's how you build power. That's how you break those divisions and break those ugly systems of oppression that keep us divided, that the boss uses. giving into those divisions is just doing the boss's work for him. And those workers won their strike. They won like a historic, like 20-year high raise. And that union stayed strong as hell. Like, I think Hawaii is like the second highest union density still.
That's
like,
right. That's right.
This stuff matters.
Yes.
And they won because they came together and they listened to one another and they refused to be divided. And that's just such a simple but important lesson, right? Like you said, we're stronger together.
Yeah, and all through the book, when there was a strike that was won, and the boss was trying to regain control of the workplace, or when they broke a strike and they were trying to, completely obliterate the union. You actually take note of what the boss was doing to segregate the workplace then, whether it was women and men or different races or backgrounds or ethnicity, whatever it was. The boss was always doing that. They were always trying to push people apart. And you'll also make note of the fact that in Ludlow, when the miners were on strike, and fighting, and in the tent colonies, and fighting even to enforce the laws that were already on the books, that what the boss was doing was taking advantage of the 24 different languages that were being spoken there and hoping that they wouldn't be able to communicate with each other. But the workers found their way to each other. And
That's
you want to say anything more about
that?
that?
Just thinking about those divisions and the way that the bosses throughout history have their own racist, xenophobic, stereotypical ideas of who workers are has worked against them. I think about the Black and Arab auto workers in Detroit in the 60s who, at that point, those bosses were bringing in Arab immigrant workers, and they assumed, Arab workers are docile, we can control them, they'll feel alienated. And they found common cause with Black workers and became so much stronger and so much more radical and revolutionary. We're still seeing the impacts of the work they did decades later. It's like they think we're stupid. They think just because we can't just because they don't respect us and they don't like us, they think that none of us can get along with one another if we have any differences.
So we're going to want to get to some questions. There is a microphone right here. So if people want to line up there, and if it is difficult for you to get to the microphone, maybe just raise your hand and we'll see if we can get to you with a microphone. But while we're waiting for people to line up, because I know this crowd is not shy, I should just note that the other thing that I noticed was there were not long, protracted stories about union elections. It just was like a little byline and a demand for union recognition during a strike. So did you notice that you weren't writing about big, long elections that were torturous?
I'm not a big fan of red tape. And it was important to me to show in this book that, especially actually right now, shout out to the NLRB and our Queen Jennifer Abruzzo. Yes. And, right? And that is an incredibly important and valid way to go about forming a union, but it's not the only option. A union is a group of workers that organize collectively to better their lot. You don't have to put a little bow and tie it all up and do it in one special specific way for it to count. Join the IWW, work with a workers center, create your own independent union like they're doing with Amazon Staten Island, or with Strippers United on the West Coast. There are a lot of ways to skin a cat and endless ways to unionize and organize and build power with the working class.
Absolutely. And with that idea, I just want to note that I had lost my Starbucks Workers United pin, but thankfully, one of the organizers and workers from the first Starbucks store in the United States in Buffalo brought me a pin tonight, so I would not be without it. Jazz Brizak is here with us tonight, too. So with that, we'll go into questions.
Okay.
Please identify yourself for the record.
Yeah. Oh, well, okay. Can people hear me on this? I can't tell if it's on.
We can hear you.
Okay.
We can hear you.
My name's Rihanna. Thanks for having me. She, her, they, theirs. So my question is, as a daughter of union carpenters, many lines down, how have you dealt with conversations with union members or union families that haven't bridged that divide, that don't see that connection, that are bought in on the union angle, but are still sort of buying the boss line of, well, we're different than them. So what have been your approaches or approaches of others that you've seen are powerful?
I think finding the common ground. All these things, it sounds so simple, right? But it's hard to find common ground with someone who sees the world a little differently, has a different perspective. I think about my boys, about the coal miners in Alabama. A lot of those folks are conservative, or at the very least, a lot more conservative than me, which is not hard to do. So, but I remember, like, there are ways to find common ground in a way that, like, doesn't invalidate anyone's experience and doesn't let people off the hook if they say some fucked up shit, if they are trying to air bigoted views or bring a bigoted perspective to the conversation. You don't have to tolerate that, but you can find ways to bridge those gaps by saying, like, okay, all right, Dad, you're not impressed with, because I mean, I love him, but we are very different people.
You got practice at home.
Honestly, it's one thing I told a friend when I got back from Alabama the first time. I was like, man, this is the first time I've been around this many Trump supporters since last Christmas. and because shit's complicated, right? The working class is not a monolith. But finding common ground and okay, Dad, like, you don't understand why I want a union or someone who works at Starbucks wants a union. Well, they have a paycheck, right? They have a boss. They're being treated badly. They're not getting the stability and the respect they deserve. Yeah, they're not operating heavy machinery, but they're going to work. They're working hard. Why wouldn't they deserve those same protections? Like, what is it? Yeah, it's different, but is it really? I think when you break it down in really basic terms and try to show the humanity, right? It comes down to humanity. And like, if your dad's like, well, you don't need a union. You work in a creative field. You work in agriculture. You work here. Like, well, why don't I deserve one too? Why doesn't someone like me deserve to be protected on the job? Like, we're not that different. And why are you insisting we are? What do you get out of insisting that we're that different? Like, me having a union doesn't hurt your job or your ability to organize. Like, why wouldn't we want to help everybody? There's plenty of unions to go around. We just keep making more of them.
Thanks.
Hi there, my name's Zach. I'm an environmental reporter with The Hill, which we actually just went public with our union last week. So I haven't gotten to this point, but I know it's in there because I habitually flip to the index. I know that you discussed Judy Heumann on the 504 sit-in in the Bay Area. And so my question is, I talk to a lot of fellow disabled people, and one of our main concerns is if we take someone to court with the ADA, the state of play in terms of the courts currently might significantly weaken it. So I guess my question is, to what extent do you think organizing can help fill those gaps?
In terms of getting the law to behave itself, that's kind of a tough one. But I mean, I always default to saying, like, organizing amongst yourselves, your own community, and building power that way. I mean, I was so excited to write about those activists because the laws were failing them. They were failing us. As disabled people, they thought we weren't worth anything. We weren't the same. We weren't enough. And those folks took radical militant action and forced the government to act. And it's probably a little bit harder now to pull that off when they have military-grade hardware in every small-town cop shop, but it's not impossible. And I don't know, man. Like, I always believe in the power of marginalized people to organize and protect ourselves. Even if you can't win in the courts, there's things we can do within our own communities to support one another and to lift one another up and try and provide the resources and the care and the infrastructure that we're being denied by the state. Like, Sarah, what do you think? You know a little bit more about the legislative side of things.
The legislative side of things. I think that it's just, you don't get justice in the courts, you get it in the streets. And
that's why I said that one to you.
It's really that simple. And if we don't understand that right now, when we're on the brink of fascism, if the majority of people who believe that we should be good, kind human beings to each other, and that we believe in democracy, and we believe that everyone should have a say, even if we don't practice that and we have to push people on that a little bit, if we don't get up and stand up, then we're going to lose it all. So this is the moment that we have to really take into ourselves that it's our turn to fight, and that we're going to have to get in the streets. And that doesn't just mean marches, that means strikes.
And Judy Heumann and the gang made it 26 days in San Francisco. I mean, maybe we could beat them.
Hell
It's a
yeah.
good record to beat, right?
Yeah.
Just saying.
Thank you both so much.
Thank you.
Hi, my name is Shane. I use he, him pronouns. I have a comment and a question. The comment is a warm welcome to DC and hello from the DC branch of the IWW.
Hey.
And the question is, as also a member of IWWFJU, the work we do mostly exists online. And the age you and I grew up in, and many of the people here, mostly exists online. What are your thoughts, and I'd actually be curious to hear from both of you, on the impact of the internet and social media on organizing?
I can speak. Man, when we were organizing at Vice, it was not everything, but it was so much because we were all on Slack and we were all on Twitter. Like we existed very much online, even though we had this brick and mortar office space too. But all of our like little sneaky asides were planned in DMs and side groups and things like that. And I remember one of the first little actions we took to exert some pressure on the boss, and it sounds so silly, kind of out of context, but we all changed our Slack avatars. And if Slack, if people don't know, Slack is a workplace communication platform that people chat, and you have a little avatar by your name. We all changed our Slack avatars, and that freaked them out real good. And then later on, as negotiations stalled, we all changed our Twitter avatars, and they really didn't like that. Because it's such a public way of showing, like, oh, they're publicly, standing support of one another. They're publicly speaking about this. Oh, we don't like that. Maybe they're a little bit more powerful than we thought. And I was trying to explain that to my dad, and he was not picking it up. He was like, he's like, what the fuck is Slack? He was like, what the fuck is Twitter? But I'm like, it's basically like digital flyers. It's like flyering or having a button day or a t-shirt day, changing your kind of online persona to fit your agenda. And that's not accessible to every worker. It doesn't make sense for every worker trying to organize. But we have so many new tools. Like, I think we're kind of lucky to be living through this organizing age where we have photocopiers, we have in-person meetings, we have politics, we have all of the tools that previous generations used to such great effect, but we also have Discord servers and group chats and Signal, and like adding more tools to the toolbox is a very good thing. And I think for some folks, maybe it's safer to organize online. Maybe it's more accessible to organize online. Like, not everyone is able to go sit in a room like this and talk to their coworkers, but most people are able to do that digitally, or their friends they can go to the library. Like, there's ways to make it work. And it's exciting to see the different ways that organizers are using these tactics and these tools. Like, I remember when I interviewed some Starbucks workers at home in Philly a couple of months ago for a story for The Nation, I asked them, like, yo, so, like, what's going on throughout the city, though? Like, how are you guys keeping in touch? What's going on? And immediately they're like, oh, we have a Discord, we have a group chat, we have, like, all of this stuff kind of percolating. Like, we're very much in touch, we're very connected in a way that it might be kind of difficult to do with the old school phone tree or old school standing meeting. And we need all of that, right? And I think those of us who are digital natives, like, hell yeah, we're using the tools we got. Like, the bosses sure are. They're surveilling the hell out of us. They're using their draconian big brother, witchcraft to keep an eye on us and ban words from their internal work chats. Like, the least we can do is start a Discord channel.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think the other thing to just recognize in this moment is that when we create those spaces online for workers, it's just like having the union hall, where you can have that space where people are talking to each other, and it's not a self-selecting space, right? But what you have in common is your workplace, and you have your common demands as well. And when you're organizing around those demands and you're getting to know each other a little bit better, then you start to trust. So one of the problems that people would identify right away in this day and age is, how do you trust the information that you're getting? Well, you're much more likely to trust it if you're getting it from your family or your friends or your neighbors or your coworkers. And so if you're organizing with your coworkers and you have a place to go where you can all discuss and you can all share ideas, it's much more likely that those ideas are going to be the ones that stick, rather than what the boss is trying to put out, rather than what Bezos is trying to push into your head, or Zuckerberg or anybody else. And so if we build those things and we use those tools to our benefit, and it's based on that worker organizing in the work site, we can be much more effective with it than they can.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for this opportunity. I'm Zephyr, she, her, slowly inching my way into the labor rights career that I've been wanting. My background academically is in conflict resolution, so I'm really fascinated by the idea of building solidarity. And, you know, as you more than alluded to, you know, clearly there's the purposeful, you know, attempt at division by politicians, by corporations. And what I've been looking for more examples of interpersonal examples of building solidarity across divides, specifically, especially in this time of increased polarization among political and ethnic lines. But it seems to me that it just kind of falls into place somehow. So I'm wondering if you can think of examples, like salient instances in your own experience or what you've heard, contemporary time frame, of when there have been, let's say, among unionizing people, you know, like interpersonally among those unionizing, or members of an already formed union who are then, you know, working towards the next objective, if they are having some kind of issue and trying to, having a problem being that's let's say politically, ethnically being divided somehow, and it's really hard for them to come together. What tactics have been used? And then this sort of parallel question is, could conflict resolution tactics be helpful?
Okay, so okay. First of all, the conflict resolution background, that is such a gift. Like, that is, you were going to do so much good for so many people. I feel like I wish more of us had that kind of background, because there are conflicts to resolve. Like, it's messy, it's difficult. Like you can have a coworker that you think is the biggest asshole in the world, but you got to organize with them to make everyone's lives better, to make their lives better, even if you think they suck. Like, that is kind of a difficult thing to work through as a person, especially if you're, you know, a more political type of person or someone with a marginalized identity. It's hard to put those things aside. But honestly, I keep coming back to the coal miners. I'm like obsessed. But but no, genuinely, like, I think about this example of the coal miners on strike in Alabama, in Brookwood, because those folks are not a monolith either, whether it's racially, by gender, politically. And there have been these moments where outside groups, like other labor groups or like local socialist groups or media outlets with a more progressive or lefty lean, have wanted to show up and help out, to fundraise, to get involved. And some of the folks welcome them with open arms, because they realize, oh, folks want to help us, even if maybe I'm not sure about that whole Bernie situation. Like, they want to help us, and like, we got to bring them in. That's helpful. But some people have not been as receptive because they don't like what they perceive to be the political differences, what they perceive to those other people's agenda or ideas to be. There's a little bit of a roadblock there. And the only thing that I've really seen get through and kind of bridge those gaps is when people show up anyway. Yes. This is the thing. Like, even the trajectory, I'm thinking of individual people right now. I don't want to blow up their spots, but like, there's one older gentleman who really hates socialism and communism as he understands them, and has been very public about these things. I saw him on a DSA live stream pretty recently. That was a fundraising event for the miners, because even if he has his, you know, yep. and that took months of striking and struggle to get to that point where he found himself in that position willingly. And he wanted to be put in that position because he realized, like, okay, these folks keep showing up for us. They keep talking about us and our struggle. They keep raising money. Like, I'm not sure about their whole worldview situation, but their worldview encompasses, like, helping people like me and the people I'm working with, the people I'm fighting for. Maybe there's something there. Maybe we can make some allowances. Maybe I was wrong. You know, it's, again, these basic things. Like, people realize who shows up for them, who cares about them, and who cares about their issues and actually respects them. Yeah, you can disagree. Yeah, you can, you know, get into weird situations sometimes. There have been some weird things going on down in Alabama. Yeah. But the most important thing has been the strike and the workers and the struggle. And that kind of solidarity is very visceral. And like, you can see it in some of the arguments, some of the conversations, some of the rallies. Like, things have gotten kind of weird. But ultimately, the only thing that has really worked and really brought people across various divides has been just that understanding of like, okay, these people care about us. I might not quite get it, but I really appreciate it. And no one else seems to. So maybe they're onto something. Maybe, maybe I'll end up speaking in front of Congress at a Bernie Sanders arranged hearing a year after I thought I was a conservative Republican. Like, people can change and move and grow if they're given real concrete proof that they're not alone and that people are willing to stand up for them, even if they see the world a little bit different.
Absolutely. The only thing that I would say, just to put a fine point on that, is that solidarity is not transactional. It is ever present, and so you got to be ever present.
Thank you so much.
We have time for these last two questions.
Okay, great.
My name is Caroline. I'm probably the oldest person in the room, which is a good thing. It's wonderful to see all you young people. I think it's wonderful you're working for the mine workers. I worked for them a long time ago. In the 70s, I was a summer intern when Chippy Blonsky was general counsel, so before you were all born. I was wondering about the mine workers you're dealing with now, because the mine workers is a very old union and a very traditional union and a very strong union, or at least it was when I was there. And I mean, they were all third generation, fourth generation mine workers. Is that still the case? Or this is the South, and the most familiar mine workers were in Appalachia, Kentucky, West Virginia, places like that. Are these mine workers part of that tradition, aware of it, excited by it? It's a marvelous union.
Yeah, I mean, that's something that stood out to me so much when talking to the coal miners, because coal mining is a really fucking hard,
Yes.
dirty, brutal job. It is
Dangerous.
not something, dangerous. Like, it is not a walk in the park. And it's a complicated time to be a coal miner because the world's on fire and the industry is where it's complicated. But so many of the folks I've talked to, they're third generation, fourth generation, their dad was in the mines, their
Right.
partner's in the mines, their grandmother, like,
Yep.
there is such a recognition of that history, and I think it really animates people and instills them with so much pride. Like, just knowing that your flesh and blood was walking underneath those hills centuries before, like, that is a pretty big deal. And the fact, like, so many of the men I've talked to, the workers have told me, like, I need to hold the line, I need to stay on the strike, I can't let my dad down, I can't let my granddad down, my grandma, like, my family, like, we're a coal mining family, and all the things that encompasses, all the things that means to people, like, they care. And I mean, Alabama is at the very end of the Appalachian
Right.
coal region, of course, so it's, just because it's the deep South and it's not Appalachia and they're not wearing red bandanas doesn't mean that they don't know and understand, the history that holds.
So it shouldn't be so hard to organize them.
I mean, they're pretty organized. What do you mean?
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, they're very organized, but I will add this. They have been on strike for over a year, and the United Mine Workers of America pays strike benefits that are higher than any other union, but it's still not like getting a full-time paycheck. And so we really encourage anyone who would like to go to umwa.org and make a contribution to the strikers, because that goes to them over and above what the union is paying them in each week. And you can really help out these strikers who have shown incredible solidarity and resolve for well over a year. And if you can only imagine doing that.
And there's also an auxiliary made up of, like, women and retirees, all types of folks who have been supporting the strike and really keeping it going, even just as much as the workers themselves had. The auxiliary, they've been every week this entire time putting together pantry bags and getting hygiene products and baby products and just all the things you need to keep your family going, and handing out hundreds of pantry bags every week to every striking family. Like, they're literally feeding the strike, and you can donate to them on PayPal. There's a woman named Hayden Wright who is incredible, one of my faves. She has the link on her Twitter. It's pretty easy to find, but yeah, there's a lot of different ways to support these folks. And honestly, like, if you're not able to contribute financially, that is perfectly fine. But even just telling people about the strike, amplifying, reporting about it, tweeting about it, like, these folks feel kind of alone and forgotten. You know, they've been on strike for a year. They haven't gotten nearly as much press attention as they deserve, because I am one person. And, you know, like, they don't forget about them, you know?
Yeah. And as Kim was noting, this changes politics. So, you know, I'll just make the note that we cannot think about dividing up our country by colors, right? It's, if we are thinking that we don't need to waste time there because we're never going to be able to turn that into a representative who represents our values, then really what we're doing is we're choosing to abandon the workers there. And we can't do that. So go ahead, I'm sorry.
No, you're good. Hey, my name's Amanda. I'm a local reporter, and an anxiety that I have always when reporting on unions and like just collectives is like the focus on an individual. And so something I'm always wrestling with is like who to profile and who to like name when I'm writing about unions. And so I'm wondering how you make those choices.
Basically, anybody who feels safe talking to me and is like, I'm like, can I use your name? Are you like, I'm a reporter, like, very clearly, like, this is gonna be out there. Is it cool if we talk about this? Do you need to be off record? Do you need to be on background? Like, it's like protecting workers is always my goal. Like, protecting them, elevating their voices, making sure that they're feeling comfortable and supported when I'm trying to help amplify their stories. And I mean, shout out to union officials and comms people and all the people that make it possible to do this kind of reporting. And they're great sources too, and great sources of knowledge and information. But talking to the workers themselves, if someone is brave enough to talk to a reporter about what's going on, they really, really want to share that story, you know? Like, because it's scary to talk to reporters. We're terrifying. But yeah, I think honestly, even just coming at it from the perspective of like, okay, if this was my uncle and a reporter came up to talk to my uncle, what could we do to make him feel comfortable and make sure he felt like it was okay for him to speak his mind? Or like, just, you could always anonymize their name. Like, you don't have to name them. Like, it helps, but
I guess like an anxiety I have is more of like United States like focus on individualism. Like, I get worried about the focus of like a leader, and I more so like, right, like a union isn't made of like Chris Walls is dope, but it wasn't just him, right? Like, it's like all of them, you know? And so like that is an anxiety that I have of like focusing so much of a leader of a union. And so like that is what, you know what I'm saying? Like, how do you?
Yeah. We definitely want to honor our working class heroes, but recognize that no one does this shit on their own.
Yeah.
There's a committee. It's not one guy. It's a committee, and then it's thousands of workers. I mean, honestly, that's just, I don't know, just make it clear in the writing and make sure you're talking to multiple people. Like, sometimes it's easier to talk to that one person, right? Because they're available, but adding in more voices is always the best way to go, I think, because you don't want it to just be one person, because it's all of us, right? Like, it's a collective struggle.
Right. But also, I think it's really important to recognize that the boss has tremendous ability to retaliate against workers who are speaking out, right? And so there's a tremendous amount of control there. And so there are workers who get to have a voice because you're talking to their union leader. And they wouldn't have a voice otherwise. So it's really important, as Kim is saying, you've got to be nuanced in your writing and how you're presenting this to the public, to your readers. But take in the fact that they have a leader, oftentimes a democratically elected leader and chosen leader, and they have the support, because if the workers are conducting an action, that leader has had to get their support in order to do that. But oftentimes they get to speak just because that leader exists, and you are actually telling their stories that otherwise wouldn't be told. Let me give you a severe example of this. During the government shutdown, there were memos coming from the White House to every single agency saying, do not talk to reporters about how you are faring, not getting a paycheck during the shutdown. Act like everything is fine. Do not say anything bad. And it was only because the workers in certain agencies had organized and had a union, that their stories got out. So take some heart in that. I understand exactly what you're saying, not wanting to just make it about the individuals, and thank you actually, because we need to encourage people to know that the power of the union is actually from the grassroots, but also recognize that being able to have that focal point and that voice that's speaking for the collective is also really important for workers' voices to be able to get out there.
Thank you.
So before we close out the evening, I want to shout out all of our fellow union friends and comrades who came out tonight in the audience. Solidarity forever. We're so happy you're here. And I'm so short. Thank you so much, Sara and Kim, for such an empowering conversation. We are just so lucky to have such amazing women in the movement to just, exist. And to everyone else, thank you, good night, and please don't forget to fold up the chairs. The signing line will start at this pillar, and books are available for purchase at the register.
If you don't mind, I think that what you've heard tonight is Kim is not only an author, she is also an organizer, and a bargaining rep, and someone who is giving us a rally cry for where we need to go. And these are the final words of her book. If others can do it, and as these past few hundred pages have shown, they very often have, anyone can. You can. If you've got a few friends ready to fight like hell right along with you, anything is possible. Si se puede.
Hell yeah. Woo, right on. Thank you, everyone.